Brothers and sisters, is it possible that your greatest challenges can be your greatest gifts? Our guest today, Gregory Schmaus, has his own healing journey where his biggest physical and mental challenges became his greatest teachers and the gifts that he is now called to share with others. So I'm looking forward to dropping in with Greg on all things healing in the 4D.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. And with that, I had just returned from Scotland for our Sacred Sons Prime Leadership Experience. And all I can really say from the event is that Europe has been activated with Sacred Sons medicine. And I'm so grateful for the men who chose to spend their time with us and to train with us and to deepen with us so that they can answer their life's calling and kind of, set out on their missions. And we have brothers holding down immersions all over Europe this summer. London is up next. We have the EMX Portugal happening August 18th through 21st, 2022. So Europe, this is going to be the last time of the summer to get with Sacred Sons. EMX is our initiatory experience, a 4-day event rooted in connection, confrontation, and celebration, rooted in brotherhood, rooted in integrity, and calling each other in, calling each other up. We're going to talk a lot about mental health today, and there's nothing more powerful than being connected to other human beings, being seen and witnessed, being held up and supported, and then being in support of. These are the times we're in. This is, no one is, it takes all of us, Greg. And I was just saying to you, this is a time for all hands on deck. And so if you're interested to get with Sacred Sons, EMX Portugal, August 18th through 21st. After that, we have the EMX Washington. That's near Brennan, Washington, August 25th through 28th. And then EMX Mexico City. Boom. Wow is right. My brothers have been training. This is a bilingual event. All events now are multilingual, but these are bilingual events. We have Mexican and Nicaraguan born facilitators, as well as American facilitators who will be in Mexico September 1st through 4th. And that is near Mexico City in Tezatlan, Mexico. I can't believe it. Like, how blessed are we as Sacred Sons to bring this messaging of brotherhood and of connection now to like multiple countries. It's so humbling. I'm so grateful for everybody who has been on this journey with us. And with that, our guest today, Gregory Schmaus. He's a holistic health coach. He is the founder of Healing 4D. He's a Chek practitioner, student of the mighty Paul Chek, and he is the creator of the course, Healing the Mind, a Journey to Wholeness. Please welcome Gregory Schmaus.
I appreciate you having me here. I'm really excited to connect, and this is a beautiful opportunity for two brothers to come together and really share what's sacred. So thanks for having me.
Yes. Conversation, connection is sacred. We are on a similar mission, and we're approaching it from different lineages, you could say, different backgrounds. What were those, I mentioned, your greatest challenges becoming your greatest gifts. What were those challenges? Just right off the top.
Yeah, man. So it's interesting, today, obviously you and I recording on the Sacred Sons podcast, and yesterday I was connecting with the brother Dennis on the Building Men's podcast. And there was something going on in my life recently where a lot of my own healing work has been reconnecting with my own masculinity. And it's funny how a lot of the shows that I'm on right now are related to kind of the brotherhood, the masculine energy. And a lot of my healing for me started when I was a child, where I was very quiet. I didn't really speak all that much, but I was super athletic. So for me, my physical body was how I expressed myself. My physical body was how I felt seen and validated and approved of by the outside world. And that journey led me into athletics. I played Division I college golf, and my dream was to play on the PGA Tour. But what happened my freshman year of college was I experienced what's called a testicular torsion, which essentially means, blood flow gets cut off to your male members and you have to go in for surgery or else you might lose one or both of them.
Wow.
So that was very painful. And going in for surgery, as I was coming out of anesthesia, I started developing a lot of obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of anxiety, a lot of kind of looping intrusive thought patterns. And my whole life changed, my whole reality changed, where I was going from a Division I athlete pursuing a professional athletic career to someone that's just waking up out of anesthesia and having no idea what I'm experiencing and just really trying to keep my head above water. So that's when my deepest healing journey started. And it was a radical shift from the world of athletics to really diving into myself and going on a decade-long journey of self-discovery. I mean, I'm still on the journey. There's no destination. It's a continuous journey.
That's right.
But it really brought me back into my feminine nature. It brought me back into the meditative aspects of me, the witness inside of me, the mindfulness inside of me. And it taught me the art of surrender. And through that process, I lost probably 40 pounds of muscle. I went from being, 185 pounds of, looking pretty good in the mirror and for all the girls, to 140 pounds where people were asking me if I was sick, if I had cancer, if I was a vegan. And what I realized is all of that muscle mass for me was a form of armoring.
Yeah.
It was a way that I hid the unresolved wounds inside of me that went back to my early childhood. And I needed to shed all of that to actually meet my soul.
Wow.
Where now, and just in the last couple years, I could actually go in the gym and lift weights, but from a place of self-love rather than self-rejection. And now it's been a process of me actually reclaiming the masculinity that I had to let go of for a period of time just to rebalance myself. And that's really what kind of activated, my journey, my healing, and a lot of the work that I do now.
Wow. The armor,
Mm-hmm.
it shows up in so many ways, and it's very effective.
Very effective.
And it's not only that it's an armor to mask something, but it's also an armor to be in service or to be of use or value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not to be discarded.
No.
And what it is, I suppose, is to be integrated,
Mm-hmm.
integrated into the wholeness of who we
Yes.
are. And so the loss of that, something that's kind of out of your control, like that, I guess that's the piece right there, when we're not in control of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that lack of control spun you into like OCD and, this type of a mental space. What was the mental space for you at that time?
So what happened for me was, as I was recovering from my surgery, the first trigger that I experienced was I was recovering in a hotel room. and I was unable to walk. I was, being moved around in a wheelchair, all strapped up. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, one of the first few nights of my recovery. And a lot of times when you wake up out of the sleep state and you're kind of in that in-between state, sometimes when you open your eyes, you might see something that might be real, might be a projection of your own psyche. But what I saw when I was recovering that night was this being, this person in the hotel door, right? So it was basically like I thought someone was in the room. I thought someone was in the room that wasn't, and it scared the shit out of me. Coming out of a deep sleep, very physically compromised, thinking as soon as you wake up, whether it's coming from your dream state or maybe I'm seeing something in another dimension. But I saw someone at the door that really triggered this stress response inside of me. And for some reason, it activated this pattern going forward where anytime I was in a building or indoors, I would always have to check the doors to make sure there was no one there. And for the next couple of weeks to couple months, I wasn't able to sit in a classroom for more than like 20 or 30 minutes without having to go outside, because those obsessive compulsive patterns were really active, trying to protect me from what felt like extreme vulnerability. And so I left school after that semester because I really wasn't able to engage fully. And for many years, what developed was this kind of pattern in my psyche where my mind would just kind of repeat the same thoughts over and over again. It would repeat the same image over and over again. It would even repeat the same word over and over again. And, I would have full days where my mind was just kind of looping and looping and looping. And if I had a few minutes of a little quiet time, it was really a blessing. And there was times where I would just look forward to going to sleep so I wouldn't have to be conscious of all those thought patterns. But I knew when I would wake up, it would just kind of start up again. So it was really a grind for many years. And I spent a long time running from it. I spent a long time trying to escape myself, trying to jump out of myself in any way I knew how. And that also became the source of a lot of addiction, right? It was addiction. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me pause you right here. I want to invite us. I want to take a deep breath into all of that.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And
yeah, man.
It's wild because I know there's so many brothers out there and sisters out there who can resonate with like waking up like that.
Yeah.
And so we're going to continue diving in. But what I wanted to ask you right here is, when you woke up today, what was that like?
The way I wake up now is in a much deeper state of surrender. And I also wake up with a strong sense of purpose. And I also wake up each morning with an incredible curiosity to really explore the depths of this experience, in this body with this psyche. And, I would be lying if I said I don't still struggle with things,
Of course.
My mind will still loop on things from
done.
here to there. My mind still will kind of act up in similar ways, but I'm in such different relationship with all of it that the reference point in which I view my reality from is what has shifted. And I think that's really an important thing for people to understand, which is a lot of times it's less what's happening to you and more the lens that you're viewing it from.
Yeah.
And so I don't really see my life through the lens of victimhood anymore. I really see each challenge as an opportunity for my soul to grow and evolve. And looking back, I know that the journey that I just shared and a lot of the pain, now looking back, I know that that journey happened for me, not to me, because of how much I learned from it, the person I became as a result of it, and the amount of people that I have helped as a result of it. You know, my life's work now is coaching people that experience similar challenges, some of which are a lot worse than I ever experienced. But I wake up each morning, you know, feeling very blessed that I have the opportunity to have conversations like this and to really live a life of meaning. You know, I think that's what we're all looking for, is we're looking for meaning. And I can say that when I wake up in the morning, I feel as though I have that.
Beautiful. I'm going to check in here just to drop in on that, like the meaning and the transmutation of pain into purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And waking up with a sense of like we got work to do. I really resonate with that. And you know, I'm exhausted at the same time because I've been putting in work. And so I guess where I'm at today and what I'd like to convey is like, Adam, you still need to rest though. Like it's all good and we got to rest. And I'm in a particular situation. I'm coming off a little bit jet lagged from Scotland and flying with a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old and all of that, you know. But as a father and just as a human being, like we give so much, and especially for dads out there, I know can relate, like taking care of the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health of ourselves is primary. Like it has to come first so that we can hold the things that we're meant to hold. So that's a little bit about how I woke up today. And so from here, with the clients that you work with, I read that you like to start with diet and nutrition. And so I think that's really cool because it's not the typical thing you would get out there seeking, you know, psychotherapy or talk therapy.
Sure.
So you're talking about wholeness, and I'm interested in that word specifically, because does it imply that there's a lack of wholeness? But why with diet and nutrition? Why is that the base?
Well, your mind can only be as healthy as the body it's living in. So for me, what I realized on my journey, experiencing a lot of what I experienced, is that anytime my body was out of balance in any way, it would trigger a stress response in my psyche, right? So the body and the mind are deeply connected through that autonomic nervous system. So when the body gets less and less healthy, the lens that you're perceiving your reality from becomes more stressful. It's kind of like driving a car with a dirty windshield when the body's unhealthy. And a lot of times when there's a stress response in the body, a lot of times the mind projects into the outer environment and looks for the stress out there, not realizing that the stress is actually coming from, for example, low blood sugar or some sort of inflammation going on in the body or a leaky gut. And a lot of times people don't register, oh, the stress is coming from my low blood sugar. They say, oh, there must be something going on in my life or in my relationships that's causing this stress, or in my environment.
And
so
how would you identify something like that? You know, and maybe a better question would be, was there something in your journey that you identified, like nutritionally or habit wise, that was causing your stress?
Yeah, so I struggled when I was struggling with a lot of those kind of obsessive compulsive anxiety, all of that. Um, I was having a lot of gut issues as well. So I was having a lot of like food reactions, a lot of food sensitivities, a lot of disruption in my gut flora. And I could very clearly feel when my gut was out of balance, my mind was much more hyperactive. My anxiety was much greater. My thoughts would loop even more.
More
So,
reactive potentially.
yes, much more reactive. And,
Yeah.
anytime there's a stress response in the body, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. What people don't realize is your body doesn't compartmentalize stress. So stress from finances, stress from your gut, stress from over exercising, it's all the same response in the body. So anytime you trigger that stress response, you go into that fight or flight state, which then you're going to perceive your whole reality through that lens, and your mind will react accordingly. So for me, blood sugar management was crucial. Taking care of my gut microbiome is critical. Making sure I'm not eating too many inflammatory foods. These are the things that are just the prerequisite to, healing from anything, especially when it comes to the mind. I mean, there's so much, obviously, research in the brain to gut connection.
Yeah.
But that whole mind body connection, it's very real. And I not only understand it kind of intellectually, I feel it somatically and experienced it firsthand. So I'm very sensitive to the subtle shifts when it comes to food and mental health. It's significant.
Yeah. And it's foundational. So that's a part of the foundation that you're creating to the sense of wholeness. And what about this word wholeness? There's a lot of projection in the world today, especially from social media, that you're not enough, you're not good enough, you're not whole. And I understand the sentiment. But what does that word mean to you? I think that words are powerful, and
Yeah,
perhaps you chose that word for a reason.
I did. So my perspective on the word wholeness, I'll share, I'm of the belief system that we're all born into this lifetime in a state of wholeness, in a state of oneness. We're not yet indoctrinated or programmed into this world of polarity and duality. So a newborn baby, when you're looking at a newborn baby, you're just looking at God. That baby is in a
Truly.
full state of wholeness and oneness because it hasn't yet formed an ego yet. It hasn't yet formed an intellectual mind to know otherwise. The thing is, it's unconsciously in a state of wholeness. So, I love when Paul Chek says, love is consciousness becoming aware of itself, where that baby's in a state of wholeness and oneness, but it's not yet fully aware of that. So what happens is we go through our childhood and we start to download all of this information from our parents, from our teachers, from our priest and rabbi, from all of the messages and information coming in from the environment. We start polarizing our reality into these two polarities of good and bad. We're taught what's right and what's wrong. We're taught what we should and shouldn't. We're taught, this is a good thought, this is a bad thought, this is a positive emotion, this is a negative emotion.
Right.
So what happens is, which there's value to some of that. I'm not saying all of that's bad or wrong. But what happens is we start attaching ourselves to everything that society has told us is right and positive, and we start divorcing ourselves from all the aspects of us that we were taught was wrong or negative. So now we've created division inside of us,
Yeah.
and we've started to fragment ourselves, right? And each time we experience pain or trauma, there's essentially another piece of the puzzle that's fragmented off from the whole. And the healing journey, when I say it's a journey to wholeness, it's really the journey of returning back to that original state of oneness. It's really putting the pieces back together and merging those polarities back into a state of I am.
Yeah.
And
when I talked to
yeah,
when I talked to Rainier Wild, he called it the solid self, like coming back into a sense of the solid self. And yeah, I like that. But I think it's important. It's this piece around the good and bad, because things do get compartmentalized that way.
yes.
And it's like there's another awareness of like, well, who decided what goes into which compartment? You know, for our children.
Yes.
And I see it in my son Noah, you know, he sees things, he watches things, and it's a lot of like, who's good guys and who's bad guys, and who are these bad guys? You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's an interesting, like, psychologically, I think that it serves us. It must have, right, for us to be so curious about it. But there's real power in acknowledging the fullness of the spectrum of that is reality.
Yes.
And that everything is not quite so polarized.
Yes. And there's different vantage points of reality. On one level, on the level of just, the personality self and the ego mind, yes, we see things through the lens of right and wrong and good and bad. And there's tremendous value for us to engage the world from that place.
Yeah.
But it's important to not get stuck there, because you can climb up to a higher vantage point and see it very differently. And what you realize is, there's the perpetrator and the victim. And we say, oh, the victim's probably the good guy and the perpetrator's the bad guy, but not realizing that 20 years ago, that perpetrator was the victim. And the only reason he's a perpetrator is because of how much he was victimized. This is why Osho said, if you really want to lock the guilty people up in prison, eventually everyone's going to be in jail. If you lock the robber or the murderer up in jail, you're also going to have to lock his parents up, and their parents and their parents. If you want to track back where's the original trauma, everyone's going to be in prison. So if you really look at it from a higher vantage point, you'll see that, the divine or source doesn't see it through that lens, because it sees the fabric of how everything's woven together. And, the old saying, only hurt people hurt people.
Right.
Right. So the perpetrator and the victim, they're one and the same.
Yeah. And you're saying, like, Osho's saying everyone would be imprisoned. And Bob Marley's saying, free yourself from mental slavery. Yes. No one but ourselves can free our minds. Yes. And man, that wisdom runs deep. And I feel like there's an awakening happening. More people are coming to a conscious awareness that someone like Bob was able to transmit so beautifully, poetically, audibly, vibrationally. And so here we are with all these tools to free ourselves from mental slavery, yes. So to speak. And I like that you mentioned coming out of the victim mindset. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important for people in general, but like this generation that's coming up. Can you speak more about why that's important to kind of shed that? And actually, here's the better question. Sure. Why do we want to heal? Why do we want to heal?
Well, I think I'll kind of flip that for a sec. An important question for people to ask is, why do you want to heal? And a lot of people have a hard time answering that question. So a lot of times I'll then ask them the question, well, what part of you might be benefiting by not healing? And sometimes that is a challenging answer for people, or a challenging question for people to answer. But once they're able to answer it, they can then see why they're not healing. Right? For example, I'll give you an example from my own life. So, and this is where I also struggled with my own masculinity, is, you know, my father was an incredible provider, incredible dad, in the sense that he provided every opportunity that we ever wanted or needed. I was very privileged in that way. But where our relationship was lacking was in emotional connection. I never really felt an emotional connection to my father. That's what drove a lot of my performance, was to feel that sense of connection, because emotionally it was never there. Yeah. My father was a physician. He was an orthopedist. And I noticed as a child, whenever I was in pain or sick or ill, my mom would take me to my dad's doctor's office, to his practice, and I would get the best treatment and connection from my dad, his nurses, and all of his partners. So that was my introduction to the victim inside of me, which developed a belief system that when I'm in pain or when I'm sick, I get more love from my father, or I just get more love, compassion, empathy, and connection in general, right? So that victim inside of me actually has secondary gain, or actually benefits by not healing. So now my job is to be the father to the child inside of me, who so needed that back then, but now I can give that to him now, so I don't have to sabotage my health and disempower myself just to get my emotional needs met. Right? So
to feel connected.
And to feel connected. And, you know, that's something that's really, really important, which is why even this, as we're recording this weekends, my girlfriend and I were teaching a workshop called Exploring Your Core Archetypes. And understanding these survival archetypes are so important to understanding why people don't heal. Because
what are some of the survival archetypes?
Yeah, so there's 4 survival archetypes that we all have. We all have a victim. We all have a saboteur, which is the classic self-sabotage. We all have a child archetype. We all have an inner child. And we all have a prostitute archetype. And the prostitute archetype is the aspect of us that compromises ourselves or negotiates ourselves. Or the part of us that's
sells ourselves, like sells our energy. Yeah, what's our price?
Yes. And there's a reason they're called survival archetypes, because they're all survival driven. They're not based on you thriving, they're based on you surviving. And a lot of times we'll actually sabotage our health and our empowerment just for what we think we need to survive.
So what's the victim? Give me the definition of the victim. This is a word that's it's in the lexicon. It's like, you know, victim blaming, you know, in the way you're saying it, like victimhood. And I feel like it's, give me some more background on that archetype.
Sure. So the victim is the part of us that is powerless. The victim is the part of us that feels as though life is happening to us. The victim is the part of us that likes to blame or outsource responsibility. The victim falls into that kind of self-pity trap. And the victim's always looking to be rescued, right? So the victim's always looking for the rescuer. And the victim, by definition, and this is a paradox, the victim gains a sense of power by being powerless, right? So by me being in pain, I felt a sense of power and control because I can emotionally manipulate my relationships for me to get what I needed by playing this role of the powerless victim.
Wow.
Right? So the victim plays a powerless role as a power play, right? Which is very interesting. So,
and so how does one then, like, what is the gateway or the piece that is to transition out of victimhood?
Yes. So here's just something I want to preface. There's a light side to all these archetypes.
Right.
They're not all bad. Remember, there's a light and shadow side to all of it. So the light side of the victim is acknowledging when you actually are being a victim and doing something about it. For example, say you're in a relationship in which you're being abused by your partner. To say, I'm not a victim, that would be silly. You want to acknowledge, yes, I'm a victim in this relationship and therefore I need to leave. Right? So the light side of the victim is acknowledging and being aware of when you are being victimized and taking action to make a change. So that's the light side. The shadow side is when we're chronically playing the victim. Right? So there's a difference between actually being a victim and playing the victim.
Right.
So when it comes to healing the victim, one of the
I like that piece quickly that you said around acknowledgement. It's like, for sure, acknowledge when you have been victimized.
Yes.
And do something about it. The action is so imperative there. It's like, and actually say something, speak up, do something about it, shift, make a decision, choose differently.
Yes.
This is the work. And there's also the medicine of acknowledgement when you are not the victim, when you are no longer the victim, when it is no longer someone else's decision how you live your life. It's important to acknowledge when we're not the victim. As a practice, as a practice, in a really good method for that is through gratitude. Like finding a situation that was hard or that was difficult, realizing that you wouldn't be where you are without it, in some way, shape, or form, and that can look differently depending where you are in your journey and what the situation is. But there's always a way to find gratitude within this life. It's a great way to transmute out of that energy of being a victim. So that acknowledgement, that's massive.
Yes, absolutely. And gratitude is essential. Also, just asking the question, is there a possibility that this is happening for me rather than to me? And also, taking action is how we shift out of the victim. Shifting out of the victim is all about taking action. And where we usually need to take action when we're feeling victimized is there's usually a boundary that needs to be set. The victim is usually the part of us that hasn't set or established a clear or strong enough boundary in relationship to something. Right. So the victim is the part of us that feels like we're taking on stuff from outside of us. And the only reason we do that is because we haven't established a boundary.
Right. And so in masculine archetypes, bring in the warrior. This is where the warrior serves us in terms of masculine archetypes, the warrior being the illuminator of boundaries. The one who defines them, the one who communicates them, the one who also holds them in a good way, also has light and shadow. We could get into that, but the way through the victim is through tapping into that warrior spirit.
And it's incredible that you shared that, because I'm sure most of your listeners are aware of the king, warrior, magician, lover, which is the 4 male archetypes. And what a lot of people might not be as consciously aware of is that those 4 archetypes match up perfectly with the 4 survival archetypes. Yeah. Right? The king and the child go together. The warrior and the victim go together. The magician and the saboteur go together.
Precisely.
And the lover and the prostitute go together. So to understand those 4 male archetypes, you also have to understand the 4 survival archetypes, because they're in very intimate relationship with one another. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I'm saying, we have the inflated and deflated version of this, but acknowledging that survival, I love that it's a survival archetype.
Yes.
It's really special that it's like, it's almost like an archetype within an archetype.
Yes. Yes. And
Really cool.
another beautiful aspect of this is, once you understand the language of archetypes, you don't take things as personally anymore.
Right.
Because you realize in relationships, it's really archetypes that are engaging one another. And once you understand that, of like, oh, this is my victim and their rescuer, or oh, this is my magician and their lover, or whatever it might be, you realize that each one of us are using archetypes as a vehicle to relate. And therefore, once you can see the archetype in the other individual, you don't take anything that they say or do as personally as an attack on you. So when you don't take things as personally anymore, you also heal the inner victim.
Truly. And so, yeah, I love this. I want to talk about the saboteur,
Sure.
the self-sabotage.
Yes.
I think everyone is confronted by it in their own way.
Yes.
Truly. Why, like, why do you feel like that permeates so much? The saboteur, those who wish to burn it down. And I've experienced that at all levels, even within sacred science. You know, there's been moments of that energy coming through.
Yeah.
And in the magician, I love how we're pairing it with the magician, who is the synthesizer, the magician who can make things happen, who can coordinate, who can organize, and dance in the unseen and the unknown.
Yes. Yes.
But the coyote of that, the sabotage,
yes.
it's as real as it gets. What do you got on that?
Yes. So this is a fascinating one. This is, to me, the most interesting archetype, is the saboteur and the magician. I love magic. So anything related to the magician, I'm all in. So when it comes to the saboteur, essentially at the most foundational level, the saboteur protects you from your own empowerment.
Wow.
Right? The saboteur protects you from your own empowerment, and it has reasons why it's not safe for you to step into your power fully. And the magician, if you look at it from the shadow perspective, right? Say you have a son or a daughter and you're throwing them a birthday party, and you hire a magician to come be the source of entertainment. What is the magician doing? The magician is using illusion and deception as a way of entertaining, right?
Yeah,
so we always
manipulation. The manipulation is the shadow, right?
Right? So manipulation, illusion, and deception. So the saboteur is all about the illusions that we're believing, the ways in which we deceive ourselves, and the ways in which we protect ourselves from the truth that we don't want to look at, right? So there's what's called a story gap. The story gap is the gap or the difference between the illusion that you're believing or attaching to and the truth that you don't want to look at or come face to face with. And the saboteur has a lot of secondary gain in protecting us from our own empowerment and keeping us disempowered, right? The saboteur wants to keep us in our comfort zone.
I was just right there. It's like it wants to keep you safe and comfortable.
It wants to keep you with what's familiar.
Yeah.
Right? So anything that's unknown is a threat to the saboteur, because there was a time in your life where you stepped into the unknown and it didn't feel safe. Or you stepped into your highest potential and expressed your highest potential, and maybe you were attacked for it. So the Saboteur says, remember what happened when you did that last time.
Wow.
So
yeah.
let's keep you in what's safe, familiar. And one thing I love is, I remember J.P. Sears saying, calling it the coffin of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
Which I
something has to
absolutely
die.
love that. Yeah,
You know,
it's
an
the
aspect
coffin of your
has
comfort
to
zone,
die.
right? So it protects you from your own empowerment. And lastly, the Saboteur knows when you step into your power, everything changes, right? So when you step into your power and you make that dietary change and you lose the weight and you start going to the gym and you start, really taking impeccable care of yourself, your perception of everything starts to change, right? Your perception of your relationship changes, your marriage, your perception of the work that you're doing changes when you step into your power.
Yeah.
So the Saboteur knows that if you step into your power, it might result in a divorce. It might result in a huge career change. So the Saboteur sees that as kind of inconvenient.
Right.
So it says, hey, let's not step into your power, because if you do, shit might hit the fan and your whole reality might change, right? Which obviously comes at a cost.
And so what would the gateway through the Saboteur, or the light side of the Saboteur, be?
So the light side of the Saboteur
I would say
is
curiosity. I mean, like, I'm looking for a gateway emotion or word, like the word acknowledgement.
Okay.
I feel like curiosity is the gateway.
Yes. Curiosity is important because curiosity keeps you open to possibility. Right?
Yeah.
I love the question. My girlfriend and her daughter, they take kung fu lessons, and in the kung fu lessons, the master, the teacher asks them, they check in with their energy. So they say, are you in a state of curiosity right now, or certainty? Because if you're in a state of curiosity, you're open to possibility and you're open to shifting something. But if you're in a state of certainty, you're closed off from all possibility. So that's why curiosity is such a powerful energy, is because it keeps you open to all possibilities. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, and like I'm referencing back in the beginning of this conversation, it's all hands on deck. And so we need our brothers and sisters to have these tools, to die to who they were yesterday, when they were playing the victim, when they were sabotaging their greatness, when they didn't, step up to the opportunity, the day, whatever it is. And we all have those moments. I find brotherhood, accountability, support, connection to be like such a pillar. When needing to shed some of these old identities, old stories, and truly a lot of these beliefs are stories that we tell ourselves. And in brotherhood and sisterhood and through connection, through ceremony, we can really begin to craft and cultivate these new stories.
Absolutely.
The stories of who we are. Yeah.
That's what healing is about. It's about changing the myth or the story that you're running inside of yourself. And I think, all of our healing journeys really are when we get to this threshold where the story that we lived by that kept us safe is now holding us back from being free. So that's why in shamanism, they have what's called the myth and the counter myth, right? So the myth is the original story that you lived by that kept you safe, it kept you alive, it kept you secure. but it's now holding you back. It's becoming an anchor. So a lot of times the body will manifest illness as a way of getting your attention, to show you the story that you're living by that's not working anymore, and that you're now ready to give birth to the counter myth. And I think collectively, we're over the last few years going through that exact same thing. So this is not just a thing that's happening on an individual level. This is something that's happening on a collective level as well.
Yeah. Any insight to what you believe the significance of that is? What is this collective shift that's happening in your experience or your estimation?
Well, I think the old myth that we had lived according to for so long is the consumerist and materialistic myth, that consumerism and materialism are going to bring us everything that we were looking for. And I think we're all starting to realize that it's not. And we're also seeing the old paradigm of the masculine, of control, power, and domination. And I think that is all unraveling right now. It's kind of like the last couple of years was the ego starting to unravel, and the ego putting up its kind of last attempts at survival, as the old paradigm is dying off. And I think it's really rooted in that consumerist, materialistic control, power, and domination mentality. And I think we're in a rebalancing. And the first thing that has to happen is you have to, pull the rug up so you can see what we were tucking underneath it the whole time. Or, seeing the bed bugs that were underneath the sheets that we were sleeping on for many years. So now we can all create a conscious shift together, which, I'm hoping it happens. And I think it will. It's just going to take, as you said many times, all hands on deck.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing because it's only an inside out game. It always is. And it's like I'm hoping that happens. And the reality is that we cast our vote for what we think will happen or we want to happen with our thoughts, words, and actions. Each of us we're constantly casting a vote for what we want to happen.
Yes.
And so the only way it will happen is if we truly desire it to happen, and that is shown through our actions.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And that's everybody's kind of like everybody does matter. Everyone is constantly like casting energy in that way. And I want to say the old paradigm, you said these words and this just came to my awareness, but the old masculine myth of sex, money, power. And a reframe on that is creation, contribution, and command.
Yes.
And so yes, sex, but sex is more than that. It's men. We are seed carriers. This is about creation. We are life force energy carriers as men. We carry the seed, and so coming out of diminishing it to only sex, but to creation and the power to create. And we are creators in this life. In contribution. It's not about how much can you accumulate. It's how much can you fucking contribute.
Yes.
This is the new paradigm of masculinity.
Yes.
And power. It's not about power, overpowering, domination. It's about how well can you command your energy. Yes, we know there's a monster in there. Yes, we know there's a boy in there. Yes, we know there's a tyrant. We all have the light and the dark. How well can you command your energy? It's not about power. It's about command. And so this is the reframe. This is the new paradigm that we are in now. That's what we're calling men into. And when we come into and it's not even a big leap by my estimation, but we come into just a slight step up into a new way of being, a new way of relating and seeing each other. That really contributes to a better world, a world that I want my children to grow up in. That's what the work is. And it comes down to every individual's you know, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's, it's about intentionality. And, when you say command, the word intention is what really comes to mind. And
I just want to know
for
the C
me,
word.
yeah, yeah. No, I love
Intention.
it. And,
Yeah.
for me, my journey of stepping back into my masculinity, it's about living with clear intention.
Mm-hmm.
And when you live intentionally, then you know how to direct the flow of energy. Intention is what's directing the flow of energy. And if you don't have intention, you haven't created an awareness of where you want your energy to go. So then it fragments, where it comes out in ways that you didn't want it to, or it comes out in conflict or violence, or, sitting on Instagram for 2 hours, getting nothing done. So there's the passive side. But for me, the masculinity in my own
Also
life
the
has
Saboteur,
been,
by the way. That's
and the
big. That's
Saboteur,
big sabotage energy.
yeah, it's been about intentionality. And also, one thing that I would definitely share with people is we're talking about big changes, but the big stuff happens with the small stuff first. So, feeding yourself well, moving your body, getting to bed on time, just all these basic foundational principles that we all talk about. That's where we all have to start, because once again, that's the lens that you're going to perceive your whole reality from. And whether you're perceiving it from a place of stress or not is going to determine how you use your time, energy, and power. So those that are under more stress are going to try and use more power and control. But those that have intention and are healthy and are grounded, then they're much more oriented towards the other and being of service, because there's not as much need for self-preservation, because your body, your nervous system, everything is balanced. Right. So I think that's one of the reasons that there's been a big misuse of power and energy, and a lot of, the kind of what people call toxic masculinity, or all of that, is people are just not as healthy. People are just not as healthy in their physical bodies as they used to be. They're overstimulated. They're,
and it's almost like in a world of canceling and calling out, nobody's calling that. Nobody's claiming that, like, hey, we have to take care of our bodies. We have to take, and not only our bodies, we have to take care of this planet that we're on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to be in that mode of contribution. Like, yeah, it's it's funny that it seems so simple, but man, it really is about the basics, isn't it?
It is. And remember that the ego has an addiction to complexity. Right. That's one of the myths as well.
Yeah.
That's one of the old myths, which is the addiction to complexity. Our culture is so focused on more and more complex technology and more complex science and more complex medicine, where we forget that there's the most power is in the simplicity. The most power is in getting the basics right. This is why Paul Chek is such in my opinion, a powerful teacher, because he really grounds himself in the basics. And, we create an illusion. We always create an illusion that a complex problem needs a complex solution.
Right.
Right. But a complex problem can actually have a very simple solution. But the ego doesn't want to believe it, because then it feels dumb. It feels stupid. So it's like, no, it has to be more complicated than that. Like, I'll have a lot of clients that come to me with, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, lower back pain, and they're looking for some complex answer to why they're having this problem. And when I say, hey, let's start by drinking half your body weight in ounces of water and just eliminating gluten and dairy for a couple of weeks from your diet, they look at me like, really? Like, it can't be that simple. I'm like, well, I've had cases where it was.
Yeah.
When
you're talking
not
about
always.
mood, when you're talking about mood, I mean, for sure.
Yeah. So that complexity addiction is a very real thing, where we're always putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you have Healing the Mind, A Journey to Wholeness. This is a 21-day course. Is that right?
Yes. So Healing the Mind, A Journey to Wholeness is a 21-day online program that I created. I gave birth to it as a result of my healing journey. It's really a result of, a decade plus of me really diving into all aspects of myself, and also a lot of experience coaching clients with similar challenges. And I created this program just really giving people the absolute essentials of what I know has worked for me, has worked for many clients that I've coached. And it's broken up into 3 one-week modules. And the first week is called Foundations, which is all the foundational principles that we're talking about, diet, sleep, movement, breath, morning routines, journaling, all of the very simple foundational practices that really support us. And then
one more in that foundation is been coming up in our circles, which is to deeply connect.
Yes.
Like adding the, like not putting it aside because it's something that involves another, which tends to be like, everyone's like, I'm going to do it on my own. But like to deeply connect with a friend, with a beloved, with your children, whatever that is, like that's got to be foundational.
Yes.
And that's one of the pieces as Sacred Sons we're like championing.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? As well as like the physical embodiments and all the supplements and making it complex. It's like, wow, deeply connecting with those in your life is just like such a healthy practice.
We could say that it's the most important practice.
Yeah.
Because the reason we have all those survival archetypes and the self-sabotage, if we actually get down to it, it's because we're afraid of losing connection. Right? These are all the things we do to try and maintain a sense of connection. Right? Because the fear of losing connection is probably the most foundational fear. Yeah. So, I would say what you just said is at the top of the list. So the first week is all the foundational principles. And then week 2, we dive a little bit deeper. We dive into the survival archetypes. We dive into some shadow work. We dive into healing what's called our core addictions. There's a lot of...
As I'm hearing this, even just like for those to join and acknowledge their survival archetypes and their relationship to each of them, having that awareness is so helpful. Like
it's like 90% of it.
Yeah, just to come into the awareness and have a roadmap.
Yes.
And we know awareness isn't the end, but it's like, then it's to take action.
It's the prerequisite.
Yeah.
And
then what's in week 3?
So week 3 is something that I've become very passionate about, which is taking all of the laws of nature and really harmonizing ourself, our psyche, and our biology with the laws of nature. So our seasonal rhythms, the elements, the polarities, and really understanding the cycles that we all go through, and really exploring, okay, where am I out of balance? For example, we have the 4 seasons of spring, summer, fall, and winter. Spring being the awakening phase, summer where we take action, fall where we retire and integrate and reground ourselves, winter where we rest. We have earth, water, fire, and air. Earth being grounded in yourself. Air is all the kind of elevated, stimulated state. Fire being that inner fire, our passion, our doing, our productivity. And then the water being where we restore and recover, and making sure that all these seasons and elements and rhythms and the polarities, that they're all in balance. And a lot of times, a lot of our illness or pain is when we've grown so out of balance with these elements of nature, these laws, that the pain teacher shows up to get our awareness for us to rebalance ourselves. So the third week is all about that harmonizing, which is really, really important.
Yeah. And the elements are so powerful and foundational. You know, we have many acronyms within Sacred Sons, and we talk a lot about chaos and order. And so how we bring order is through the original remembrance of directions, elements, and rituals, and incorporating directions, elements into daily rituals, into daily practices. And then there's, you know, there's other rituals that maybe don't happen so often, but like coming into contact with how those elements show up in your daily in your daily environment, but also the elements within, the emotions within, the passion within, and those things that you're describing. So right on, man.
Yeah, man. So that's the 3-week journey. And, you know, I've had a lot of people reach out to me that were interested in my one-on-one coaching. And I told them, hey, look, you know, take the 21-day program, take that HTM journey, and let's just chat when you finish it, and just see if you still feel like you need me. And I've had a lot of people that said, like, you know, the program really supported me. It grounded me in the things that I wasn't yet doing, the practices that I wasn't yet engaging in. And it really helps you build a toolbox. Yeah. And, you know, my goal for each client and student is for them to never need me again. Yeah. And my goal with that program is to offer that to as many people as I possibly could. So, yeah, man.
Cool. Check out Healing the Mind, A Journey to Wholeness. Check out Healing 4D. Greg, with everything that we're talking about, and you know, with the work you're doing, is there anything or any message that you would like to leave with the brothers and sisters who are listening?
The first thing that rose up in me is, and I'll just kind of share the first thing that came up for me, is for them to know how loved they are. Very simple. Yeah. Just, we forget how loved we really are. And it's not just by the people in our life. It's by source, it's by the earth, it's by all the things that are providing for us on a daily basis. And I think that's just the first thing that came in my heart, is like, we're so damn loved and we forget it all the time. And so much of our pain is what we think we have to do to be worthy of that. And sure, we want to get things done and take action, but we're so loved at just a foundational level. And we just, even me, I forget that way too often. So that's just what came into my heart when you asked that question.
I love it. There's a song we sing in ceremony. You are so loved by the universe, you know, yes, by your ancestors, by the earth. I love that message. You are loved. Gregory, you are loved. Adam, you are loved. If you're listening to this, if you got this far, know that you are loved. With that, Gregory Schmaus, Adam Jackson, Sacred Sons. We're out, family. Peace.